Welcome to the Fertility Mind podcast. I am your host, Jessica Friesen, a certified fertility mindset coach, a sound healer, and an international best-selling author. My mission for this podcast is to give you weekly episodes where you hear my own success with IVF and how mindset and manifestation changed it all for me. You will also hear from my guests who share their success stories in the fertility world. I want you to know that you are not alone. Even when things feel tough and when things feel like they aren't going your way, the tools and techniques you will get in this podcast, I know can change everything for you too. So thanks for being here with me today, and let's dive in. Hello and welcome back. Today I have a guest with me, Nicole Melnyk. She was actually my fertility nurse, one of them, and we had such an amazing experience together. And throughout the episode, we will share how Nicole herself was actually on a fertility journey, and being a nurse in the fertility world and having your own fertility struggles, I think, has a very unique perspective. So, Nicole, introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Nicole. As Jess said, I am a nurse. I've kind of worked all over. Yeah, I'm here just to chat and dive into whatever we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. So here's the thing. When you are in a fertility clinic, for anyone that's listening, Nicole was the sweetest person to ever talk to on the phone. I remember when we were doing blood tests and like when we were doing cycle monitoring and everything, just even when I would see Nicole in the clinic and she was so gentle taking blood work. If you've taken lots of blood work, not every nurse is gentle. And she just always had this like smile on her face. And it was like, no matter what you were going through, you got to meet a smiling face. And it was so incredible. And I feel like it depends on your clinic, but at least the first clinic that I was in where I met Nicole, it was a very personal office. It was very nice. Like you knew the nurses. It wasn't a massive office where you could see any nurse at any time and you had access to emailing them, which was really nice because you have so many questions that you don't necessarily think of when you're in the office. You're either just excited or you're nervous or you don't even know what to ask. Um, and I'll get right into the nitty gritty, I guess, without saying all the fluff. Um, I remember when I was so excited. I was driving down to the clinic and I just had this really good feeling, and I was listening to Law of Attraction audiobooks and things like that. And Nicole was doing my beta test. And she said to me, she's like, "You're so excited. Do you know something that I don't know?" And I just said no, because we were advised, like, don't test at home because you could possibly get a false negative or a false positive. At that point, I had never tested. So I was just really excited. And later that day, Nicole called. And she, in the softest voice, just said, "Jess, are you at work?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I need you to close your door and I need you to sit down." And I was shaking. I was trying to hold it together. If you need a Kleenex box, listeners, get a Kleenex box. I feel like this might be
I
really
need one. I
emotional.
need one.
Um, but it was just, you were so gentle and just the way you broke the news. And like with the first time you hear the words like just sit down, like you don't know like is the number low, but there's like still a chance. Um and I didn't read too much on Google because I wanted to experience the experience for me, not what someone else warned you to do. Um and I had been on social media a little bit, and you hear people say like this is my seventh IUI, this is my second egg retrieval. You hear all the stories, and I thought, I'm not everyone. I'm me. So I just want to go in and experience this. And, like I felt like you cried with me and like you calmed me down for the 5 minutes that I had you on the phone. And like you just said, like email me at any time. And you just said, like, I am so sorry, but you hear the words, you're not pregnant. And I was at work. It was at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I knew I had to keep it together for 3 more hours before I could go home and just
Yeah.
really bawl my eyes out. But it was something that I truly like just I held on to. I was like, I had a nurse that called me and comforted me. It wasn't just I wasn't another number, another someone, by the way, you're not pregnant. Okay, see you later. Like you gave me, like you said, email me anytime. I'm here. And you just like it felt like you were going through this whole experience with me. Like it was truly a phenomenal experience to have you on my side.
Oh, and you're saying the Kleenex box, and I'm thinking, yeah, man, I'm gonna need a Kleenex box because you don't get to hear this side of it, right? You do it as your job and you try to do the best that you can, and you have to kind of put a wall up at some point, right? But then, I'm listening you talk about, you weren't Googling, and I'm like, I am the worst nurse. I broke all my own rules when it was my turn, and I was like Googling, and even now I Google everything, and I'm like, what does that mean? What does this mean? And it's so bad for your mental health. I'm gonna say that now. But yeah, it's really it was a really nice clinic to be able to get to know we didn't have that pressure of that go, 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 even though, there's always something to do. It was very nice that we could, take the time and spend the time that we needed to. And there wasn't that pressure of,
Mhm.
hurry up and move on to the next appointment. So that was really nice. Yeah.
And honestly, from being in two different clinics from the patient side of it, I was incredibly thankful for the first experience that I had from going from a smaller clinic to a massive clinic that had, I can't even tell you how many thousands of patients, and the biggest weight room I've ever seen. And you just
Mhm.
like, and it was filled. And when we did government funding, I actually did have my own nurse to call and talk on. But before that, I was just another number. Like you took your number, you would wait for your ultrasound appointment. You would get like cycle monitoring would call you and they'd be like, okay, like you need to come back this day. And I'm like, okay, awesome. And they're like, okay, we got to go by. I'm like,
Yeah. There's so
okay.
many different ways that clinics work. And,
Hmm.
I mean, we all know the wait times are crazy right now, right? So it's trying to be efficient, and everyone's trying to find the best way to do it. And there's different ways and different forms. What works and what doesn't. It's finding that
Hmm.
balance. But I've worked in all of the different formats to see. Um, yeah, but this could get us into a bigger conversation of like what needs to be improved in healthcare, because I have a whole theory on all layers of healthcare and how to fix it. But that's another podcast I think we can get to if we're going to go down that tangent.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, but I think honestly, I would say both clinics I had amazing experiences despite anything that happened. Um, because I got to have like the loving feeling from the first clinic, and then I also like my fertility doctor happened to be the director in my second clinic. So he was very like all business, very straightforward. And I think at that point in my journey, I was like, just tell me exactly what I need to do. I don't want fluff. Like just give it to me
Yeah,
straight and let's
I
be
would
done.
love. Yeah.
And so I think I got the best of both worlds, honestly. Um, and I really think where it is, where you are in your journey too, how you perceive your clinic. And um, I don't think a lot of patients know, like you have a bit more control than you think. Like often you feel like
Yes.
when you go in, you're just like, okay, tell me what I have to do.
And
But you
you
can
and you
voice your
listen like you're
opinion.
a student, and you do your homework like you're told. Yes,
Hmm.
absolutely. There's so many things you've said that resonate with me. One is that I'm really bad at cutting you off, Jess. I'm sorry. You'll have to like
Gosh,
keep
talk
me on a
away. I don't
tangent
mind.
here. um, I believe that even if you don't have a good clinical outcome, your experience can still be good, because your journey isn't always going to end up with a baby, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes it's part of that journey to have those conversations, those hard conversations, to get you where you need to be to make that next decision, whatever it is, right? And sometimes for people, it's being comfortable with saying, okay, we're done. This was our last go, and we're comfortable with that. And I think, that was always my message of, it's not going to happen for everyone, but we'll try the best that we can to get you that you're not leaving one day in like a bitter, this is it, it's over, and there was no closure, right? And sometimes it's that closure. And I have my own struggles with things that I've done I definitely play that what if game with myself, and I try to nurse myself with my nurse advice, and it's easier said than done, right? Um, and then, oh my gosh, I forgot what my second thought we were on. It's okay, it'll come back to me.
Nicole, I want to stop here for a quick second. I really want to talk about where, where people are when they get to the point where they're ending their journey. So, from a mindset manifestation coach, what I do with my clients, I've had clients at all different parts of their fertility journey, but I want you to make an educated decision based off of all the things. Because what I do is I provide you with a toolbox that has a lot of tools that you can pull out at any time. Because I know fear. Fear is a massive con artist, and fear is what stops people so much from continuing. And they are left with the feeling of, what if? What if, like 5 years from now, what if I would have, persisted through? Or what if I had money to continue on? Or what if XYZ, but you decided to end your journey with not all the information? So when I give you this toolbox filled with your tools, and you can still sit and visualize and have that massive excitedness or joy or love when you think about having a baby or babies, how does that feel? If you are still there, I will tell you, don't give up. If money is what's stopping you, I will teach you how to manifest money. If it's grief that's stopping you because based off of what you've gone through your journey and you really don't think that you could continue on if there's possibly another loss, I can teach you how to bless and release that. I can work with you on how to get you to a different state. Because if you could let go of that fear of that loss, would you continue? How bad do you really want your baby? I'm not ever saying anyone doesn't want it bad enough. That is never my intention, and those will never be my words. I will say, how bad do you want this? Because if you are at the point where you say, you know what, I really truly believe I'm done, I accept that. I am not here to convince you of anything. I am not here to change your mind. I am here to give you the tools for you to use at your disposal and for you to make the best decision. Because I can tell you fear is paralyzing. I can tell you grief is paralyzing. And I can tell you that it makes a lot of decisions because there's guilt. So if you're in a secondary fertility journey, the guilt that you feel, that sometimes that guilt is so much that it stops you. If you were on your first fertility journey, the guilt of maybe wanting multiples, or the guilt that it maybe might be against your religion, but you really want to have a baby, we can get you out of that guilt and into what it is that you want. Again, I will reiterate, I cannot guarantee you a baby because I am not a doctor. I am not the universe. I am not a crystal ball. And I don't know the infinite possibilities that are coming to you. But I do know the universal laws apply to every single human being. And if you have this toolbox, I want you to make that decision based off of you, not based off of fear, not based off of grief, not based off of a whole thing of encompassing, maybe not necessarily the right words that I'm using, but it encompasses your whole journey, is what I'm trying to say. And I just think it's imperative because I want you, if you ultimately decide to end your journey without a baby, you're doing it without the what if. You're understanding you've connected to your goals, you've connected to your dreams, you really have visualized your life. And what does it look like? Because when I tell you there's infinite possibilities, there is infinite possibilities of ways that things can come to you. And again, I will repeat, I'm not the universe, so I don't know how they all come. But I have seen it over and over and over and over again, how different things have come. I've experienced in my own journey when I had an intuitive thought to freeze sperm. I did not know about freezing sperm. That was not ever a thought. That was never a conversation my husband and I had. It was literally a thought that popped into my mind, and I blurted it out to my fertility nurse. And she was like, I can ask. And again, go listen to episode 2. You'll hear the synchronicities. But that is just something I need to touch on because I don't ever want any single person to leave the fertility world without their baby with the what if, what if, because you can have infinite ways of having your baby. There is surrogacy, there's adoption. And I know some people don't even want to think about that because they want to carry their baby. And that's okay. I'm not here to tell you how it's coming. If you are determined to have a baby and you carry this baby, I will give you the tools for you to use. And I'm here with you every step of the way. So before I go off on any more tangents, I just needed to touch on that part because I know I've seen it too often. And I personally know many people that have given up on their journey because of fear of money or fear of grief or fear of guilt, because it doesn't necessarily fall in line with their religious beliefs, and fear of judgment that you're in a fertility world. Like, and I know that is a lot of old beliefs, but you'd be amazed at how many people say, like, what are people going to think of me that I'm in a fertility world and like that I can't have a baby naturally? Is there something wrong with me? I can't tell you how many people like it's something that they hold on to, and I want you to be able to move past that. And anyway, again, I'm going to go off on a long tangent of what it is that I do. But the reason I created my service is because this is something I wish that I would have had on my journey. I can't say my journey would have been any different. Um, but I know I would have found a lot more joy in the journey, and I wouldn't have necessarily gone down those deep, dark, gray, dark areas that I went down. Um, and I would have understood things very differently. But I really truly know and believe that I did manifest my babies, and I persisted when my environment, my bank account, and everything told me not to. And I'm so glad that I did. I am so glad that I did because I couldn't let go of that little voice that was inside of me. And I can truly say, because of having my mindset and manifestation toolbox, my life has transformed in ways that I could have never conceived without this information, without these tools, because I was in a state where the world, like things were always happening to me, they weren't happening for me. My environment told me a lot of things. And, you know, it was, I would have given up. I would have really given up without a lot of these tools, this information. And because I've used this, I have created a life that I desire. I have connected to goals and dreams, and I visualize and I get excited about my future. I no longer hold the beliefs that I used to hold of unworthiness and different things. Like, I really have changed me without changing me. I am still absolutely me, but I use my tools and techniques to have the things, manifest the things that I want. And again, I'll repeat, the universal laws apply to every single person. And I really, honestly, truly know, without a shadow of a doubt, I believe that when you use the universal laws, this is a desire of yours. You are meant to have the things that you desire. And I know it goes against science. I know it goes against things, but I've seen miracles happen. And, I call them manifestations. People will call them miracles. Whatever resonates with you, call it that. Um, I needed to share this because if you are at the point where you are feeling like you need to give up, find me, please. I don't ever want a single person in this world to not have what they desire. And being in a fertility world with two different doctors, two different beliefs, two very different medical protocols, and seeing how differently they're run. And if I gave up, I wouldn't have the family that I have. And my God, every day I'm so thankful. But I see people tell me, like, you're one of the lucky ones, so good for you.
And you were always super positive. Even when you were crushed, you were still like the cheerleader for IVF and it's going to happen. Like I myself, I think I'm more of like a harsh, give it to me straight. And I always thought I would be like the tough parent. I'm definitely not. I'm the soft, gooey one. Um, hard rules. And then I break all the rules. Um, you were always, even in your like darkest, heartbreaking, like breakdowns of tears over the phone, you were still like, I knew you would be good. Sometimes I would worry about you being like, you're crushed. Like this is, I don't know if you'll recover from this. But then the next day you'd be like, we've got this, it's going to happen. And I had this positive sign and I was like, okay, here we go. It was always kind of like not letting you get too excited because I almost felt like I had to rein you in a little bit because I didn't want you to be so crushed, right? Like,
Mhm.
but you were always super, super positive,
Well, thank you.
bright
But
and shiny.
I honestly, there was very, I don't talk about it a lot. There was some very dark periods, and I think because I have a blended family, having three stepdaughters and trying to shelter them because they were too young to understand what IVF and all of this stuff
Hmm.
was. But they would ask a lot of questions about like, when are you going to get pregnant and why do you have to go to the doctor so much in the morning? And I'm just like, oh, it's just testing to make sure I'm okay.
In like context, we're talking about almost like a decade ago, right? So like
Mhm.
so much has changed
Oh.
in what's been normalized, what's been talked about, what's
Mm.
available. And yeah, we're talking about like a decade ago where this was just like, I don't even think people were doing AMHs back then. Like we weren't talking about egg freezing. We were only doing IVF. Um, yeah, it's crazy to see how much has changed in 10 years, but
Well, just even like my medical protocols from 2014 to 2019, like I was
Mhm.
blown away when like they're just like, you do. I'm like, where's the nasal spray? Where's this? And they're like, we don't do that anymore. I'm like, oh, cool. This is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Like that's a whole nother story about the medical protocols and things. But I do remember the last time that you called, which was after my third implantation failed. And, I believe that I don't quote me, but I was told that like even when you take the biopsy, because it like shakes up your uterus a little bit, that it could potentially be more sticky and again, like I hold no judgment. But I was so excited to go into the third implantation and when you called the second time, I was like the F bombs. They were
Mhm.
there very much in my head and like, oh my God, this is not supposed to happen. And like I was saying, it was like the floodgate. I was thinking of like all the things I read on social media. I'm like, how is this supposed to happen? Like, how did like just no, no, don't tell me
Yeah.
this. And I think you told me like the number, my beta number was 5, and you're like, that's not high enough to really count as a pregnancy. And I was just like, but there's something. And it took me a good like 2 weeks to bounce back. Like I had to hold a certain amount of positivity because I had my stepdaughters in the house and I had to I was working in an office. So people call you all day long to tell you horrible things or yell at you. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you have no idea what's going on in my life right now. Just stop yelling at me. But I'm like, uh-huh, yeah, okay.
Great
And
transition. I love this. Yes. Oh, I know. The things you have to do. And I mean, that's really much, I think one of the things I was taught in nursing school is like, yes, you can cry with your patients, but you don't want to ever have your patients taking care of you that you're taking on too many of their emotions, right? So you need to have that separation. But
mhm,
yeah, I know we're going to go down this route, but I can't, I feel like it's almost like comedic now looking back at like all the stuff I was dealing with at the same time. And like,
mhm,
just, I went from that clinic back to the hospital for some time. And I was at the hospital for about 4 years in another position, not fertility related. And during that time, my entire life like melted down. I'm going to give you like the broad overview of what happened so that we can like piece it all together. So I was in the hospital for 4 years and then went to New Zealand for a couple years there and then came back. So there was about 6 or 7 years between when we were talking, probably a good 8 or 9 years between me knowing I needed probably fertility treatment to actually starting my family. So there was a lot of like, oh, this isn't going to happen for me because of all these other life circumstances that have happened. So when we met, if you're a fertility nurse, you take advantage of what's available for you and that you can have some of the testing done as well. And I was like, oh, look at that. My FSH is through the roof and my antral follicle count is awful. Great. This is awesome. And that was back in like 2013, 2014. And then I was supposed to get married in 2016, and that we called off that wedding. So that was really a struggle because I was 30 at the time and I was like, my clock is ticking. And I was like, okay, well, you know what? If I call off this wedding, I'm probably not going to be able to have kids because by the time you call off a wedding, get over that relationship, meet someone new, decide if they're the right person, get married, have kids, whatever order you're going to do things in, right? I was like, well, I'm already in trouble now if I wait like 5 more years. I wouldn't recommend this to any of my patients. And here we go, right? So and I had a discussion. Like I remember talking with my mom, being like, you know what, if I call off this wedding, it's the right thing for me, but you're probably not going to have grandkids. And she was like, I can have fur babies. It is fine. We can have fur grandbabies. Don't you worry. Like, and it was really that decision of saying like, this is going to change the trajectory of my life and what I thought was going to happen. And, your timing and everything you have planned. And then probably a year and a half later, I met my husband on Tinder. And I was like already set. I was like, I'm going to New Zealand. And I was already started the process and I was like getting my nursing license. And you had to do like a bunch of English tests and all of this to get like your license converted to the New Zealand license. And I remember I met him. We went for our first date, and I'd already I'd already gone for my English test that day. And I was like, I'm not going to tell him because if I tell him I'm moving away, he's going to be like, "Ooh, booty call, here we go," right? Like any warm-blooded male, right? I'm sorry to stereotype here, guys. But any warm-blooded male on Tinder, I guess maybe you make those stereotypes, right? So we went on our first date, and then I think by our third date, I think I was drunk and was like, "I'm moving to New Zealand. Do you want to come with me?" And he was like, "Sure, I can work from anywhere." And so that's how our like story started, and we traveled around the world together. And then when I was working in New Zealand, I did my AMH, and I was like, "Cool, look at that, I'm in the red zone." Awesome. Even if I do IVF, there's less than like a 50% chance I'll get 6 eggs. Cool. And then we were trying in New Zealand and no luck and was like, couldn't like nothing, not even a blip, like no positive, no nothing. And we're like, okay, let's start like crunching and saving our pennies here. And then that was when Zika was like wild around the world. So we pressed pause and then came back to Canada. And we were planning on starting IVF and we're like gearing up and like, chatting with our doctor and my doctor that I was working with and our plan was and what we were going to do. And it was like, she's like, so what do you think? Are we going to start meds this month? And I was like, I actually think I need a pregnancy test. And we talked about it a little bit. I had nurse timed everything that I was testing on strips and, trying to do everything I could in the like gear up to being like, we're going to do IVF. Let's give it as much as we can, like educated knowledge that we can do with, testing and timing. We figured out is I think even though I have a normal like 28-day cycle, I ovulate really late. So I was like totally missing the window on my general timing and got it right. And maybe like one of the last 2 raw eggs in there was ready for us. But yeah, no, like statistically, your AMH doesn't predict I've been told, so don't take me as the expert here, but your AMH won't predict, your chances of a natural pregnancy. It just tells you information to make that decision of whether, you should travel around the world for 6 years and or should start trying. And, I broke all the rules and somehow got very lucky. And we also had lots of conversations with friends. I had a friend that had already volunteered to be an egg donor. So we, thankfully we're on the same page as a couple that, this is what we wanted. We were going to do this, we were going to do this, and then we're going to do this. And that was our plan. And, plans change, but we were, always said if we have one, we're very happy and thankful and lucky. And we count ourselves lucky that we have one, and we're very, happy and busy with the toddler world. But yeah, all of that to say, I used to always say to people, don't test if you're not ready to act on it, because, or the opposite, if you need that information to make the decision of like, oh, I want to travel or do this or do my master's first or whatever to help you make those decisions. I, broke all of my rules of what I said to myself, and it just, I had no control over some of it, right? Like finding the right partner and later in life and being older and considered a geriatric mom. All those things I said I wouldn't do and all the information I had it all, but you can only control so much. So yes.
So that's amazing. So you guys got pregnant naturally. I did
We
not know
did.
that.
Hmm.
That's awesome. That is amazing.
But we had like everything lined up to go. Like had our like bank account ready and had talked about our plan, and we had tried and we considered doing IVF in New Zealand, but just, where we were financially in New Zealand, it just wasn't, it was either we would break the bank or, or eat, right? So we need to plan this a little bit better. So we had talked about doing some treatment there. We had thought maybe about, I had been diagnosed, they thought maybe with endometriosis. So it was like, but then I worked for an endometriosis specialist in New Zealand, and he was like, I don't actually think you have endo, and we can't really tell unless we open you up, and we're not going to do surgery because the way the medical system works there. I didn't want to, do that and pay for specialists and those kinds of things. We were putting our money towards other options. But yeah, we had all the discussions, had it all ready, had our egg donor lined up for when this round failed, and my did the antral follicle counts and like looking at them being like, this is, if I were going to do IVF, this isn't the month because there's not enough eggs there to go. So all the prep, but then, getting real lucky with the timing, I guess. Yeah.
That's amazing. And so share, I guess if you're willing to share your experience, because like you being a fertility nurse
Mm-hmm.
and you knew your own counts, you knew that they weren't great, had left the clinic
Mm-hmm.
to go on. And I was so sad because like there was also so much going on that I know we can't talk about on here, but our
Mm-hmm.
fertility clinic had closed and we were able to still do cycle monitoring there. So, but I was like, I don't have Nicole on my team anymore.
Yeah.
But I was very thankful that I didn't have to drive 3 hours just for cycle monitoring, that I
Mm-hmm.
was that um and again, like after we had our 12-week ultrasound, that was our last contact with that fertility clinic. Um and like it you I guess you graduate, but it didn't feel
Yeah.
it felt so weird. And because we were friends on Facebook, I had noticed like things were going on in your life, but I was like, I can't message her yet. I can't message her yet. And when I did see you go to New Zealand, I was like, yes, she's doing something. Like, oh my God, I'm so excited for her. Um, so I was your silent cheerleader from afar.
Yes. And I mean, there's a lot of things I feel like I need to clarify for people. So we were not Facebook friends when you were a patient. I
That is true.
allowed that after. Yeah. And I was always very cautious of that because I know we build such strong relationships. And I even had another ex patient that, I said, okay, you kind of change that relationship of saying we're no longer like nurse and patient, and we can be friends. But I can't give you any fertility advice or talk about any of that. And like,
Mhm.
I'll cheerlead for you and support you. And I had an ex patient once be like, "Oh my gosh, they left this message. What does it mean? I'm freaking out." And I had to be like, I can't because I don't know. Like I
Mhm.
can't tell you." But like, I helped her through it as a friend to be like, "This is, just take a deep breath and we'll and go from there." And then also being like, oh, you're not on my team anymore. And that's really hard because I know when I left New Zealand as well, I had these same kind of relationships that I had. I had a patient come in and she brought me flowers and was like, we're going to miss you so much. And, I have a number of ex, patients from New Zealand, us Facebook friends as well that I keep tabs on their journey and stuff. And even though I'm not on your team anymore, I feel like I was always there are, patients that resonate with you and you still, whether you know it or not, we're always thinking about you. And there's, it's, back in your mind, there's always, and there's some, horror stories that haunt you of being like, that it didn't work out and you never heard from them again. And you were like, oh, where are they? I hope they're like living their best life, but you're worried about them. But that relationship has ended and there's only so much you can do, right? But it's just so hard to, kind of, it's there, it's in the back of your mind all the time, floating in and
Mhm.
out. You see people and you think, I know them. Do I know them? I know them. They look like someone I know. I've lived all over the world, right? That you don't, it's not always who you think it is, but
Yeah.
yeah, 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 those relationships, and it's hard to find that like balance between, there's a lot of patients that I would be friends with in the outside world and a lot of my friends who have then become patients, and that navigating how do I give you advice as my friend, and I
Mhm.
know I'm kind of like, cut to the chase. So I think in a professional world I'm a little bit softer in my delivery, and then as a friend I'm like, you don't do this, do that, da, da, da. Like I take a little bit more ownership on my friends, and I think that's sometimes bad too, right? That they need to make their own decisions, and I can only provide as much advice and support as I can. And it's hard. You have that insider knowledge too on your friends of being
Mhm.
like, this is what they need, and I'm gonna help them because I know how to communicate with them better. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's interesting for sure.
Yes, and thank you for clarifying because yes, I didn't find you until like after you had left the clinic, and I don't even know how or why, but I was so sad when you left, and I was just like I need Nicole on my team. Um, but and truly, like, I don't know when I Facebook friended you, um, but, like, I knew something had happened in your personal life because I knew, like, you had talked about, like, you were now moving on to New Zealand, and I was like, "Okay, she's doing something," like, I didn't know what happened with you and your ex, I didn't know anything,
Yeah,
um, but yeah, I was so happy to have added you on Facebook just because when you develop a relationship with someone, and especially through a really hard part in your life, like you just want to know that that person's doing good.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, and I was just like, I was so excited for you. And I was like, when you accepted me as a friend, I was like, oh yeah, I get to see how she's doing. um, and the crazy thing is, our last, well, my last baby, I can't speak for you, um, but our babies share the same birthday, which I think is
We
like, for
do.
me, it's kind of like a full circle. I'm
And I feel like
that
we
way.
kind of had like drifted apart too, and then that happened. I was like, no way, they're not on the same day, are they? That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, how that probably first and last for, I can't, you never know what's going to happen in decisions and things, but
Yeah.
that is another podcast for another time in
But,
life
like,
somehow.
the thing is that you did such an amazing job, and it really did give me that whole, like, new perspective of, like, as I'm sitting here crying to you and you're, like, all, like, choking up on the other end, you're going through, like, you know that, like, this could potentially be your future too, and you have to deliver the bad news or, like, the good news when you get to deliver the good news and things like that, and, um yeah, for me, it very much changed my perspective on people of like, we really have no idea what's going on the other side of anything. And even then, people are only going to choose to tell you what they want to tell you. They're
Hmm.
not everyone's like, oh my God, my life's a disaster. Like some people are very
Everyone's not as
private.
open as me. Yes, I know.
Well, and I've always said, like, I'm an open book. Ask me anything. Like,
There's a
sometimes I can
time and
get,
a place though, right?
yeah,
It's the same.
yeah.
We're both
Um,
professionals.
But, like, there is some things that I'm very quiet about because I'm like, "This isn't meant for social media, and this is"
Hmm.
and if you're not in my very, like, close-knit family, like, I can say, like, "Yeah, they're okay right now,"
Yes. Yeah,
and
yeah,
I'll leave it at that. I'm not gonna be like, "This, and this just happened today." Um,
Yes, and that's sharing, there are a lot of things that are private and personal and need to stay private and personal, right? And yeah, I mean, I think it's hard in the same way of being like I'm so touched that you've shared all this with me, and I think the first time you sent me a voice note, and I was like blushing and crying at the same time, being like, you hope you have a good impact on someone's life, but you don't know, and you never know, and you just kind of
mhm,
do what you have to do. But I mean, at the same time, too, the things that, I think I was overly paranoid about because you just know too much, right?
mhm,
Like, and my poor husband, I was like, don't celebrate it yet. Don't celebrate, when we should be like jumping up and down because, it's positive. And I'm like, just wait. And we need to check a beta. We need to check it again in 48 hours. And we're going to check the trend again. And then we're going to check this. And then we're going to get an NIPT. And then we're going to check the anatomy scan. And then we can breathe. Well, for 30 weeks, 30 odd weeks, he's holding his breath because I'm paranoid
mhm,
and, robbing him of those experiences. So it's trying to, find that balance of living your life with knowing too much and trying to have your own hope, right? Because I think probably I was a little bit more paranoid than I needed to be. But when and you've seen and had to deliver these heartbreaks, you
mhm,
go, you've got to protect yourself in the way that you can. And I think, as much as we need to process it, we also need to protect ourselves to be able to do it, right? And to
mhm.
get through those days and move on to the next one. And fingers crossed there's a you know, different day tomorrow.
Mhm. Absolutely. So yeah, I feel like this conversation could very much go on forever and ever and ever.
Yes.
I also think it at some point, like I think it's amazing that people get to hear a nurse's perspective. Number one, that you, because you had access, you were in the fertility clinic, you were able to do some testing on yourself to see where you were. And then knowing that knowledge while you were seeing your patients and then going through life experiences that you've gone through. And then like you got to go into your relationship with your husband saying, like, this
This
is
is
my
this
scenario.
is the
Like,
deal. Yeah.
whereas I think it's just like, but you as a nurse, like you had to comfort people. And even when you're pregnant and going through all the things that you're going through your pregnancy and not telling people because you have all of these fears that you're going through. And you're like, yeah, it's okay. Don't worry. Just have
Yeah.
practice. Just do this. You're okay. Um, like it's just, I commend you because number one, you know far more than I do, who's not a nurse. And yeah, it's just, yeah. So,
Things happen, and I think my story speaks to that of like, up and down, and how many times they're sitting there and girls are like, oh, my AMH is awful. And I'm like, mine's worse than yours in my head, right? Being like,
yeah.
and they're like, it's never going to happen. And you're like, oh, I'd be like, oh, wow, look at that antral follicle count. It's amazing. And they're like, oh, it's awful. And you're like, well, it's better than mine, girl. Like, yeah, this is great. Like, look at you. You go with it, run with it, right? So
Yeah.
your perspective and sometimes, trying to just take a time out and think, and I'm the worst for that, right? I catastrophize and I go down this like rabbit hole. And I think, we need to find a way to pause and reset because otherwise, there's just so much information at our fingertips now and wrong information, right information,
Mhm.
and figuring out what that is and without going crazy in the meantime, right?
Mhm. Absolutely. So, um, I would love to have you on the podcast to go through this because now I'm not gonna like I think it would be amazing to talk about like for anyone that's listening for the first time that maybe they're waiting to get into like a fertility clinic, like their consultation, like what an AMH is, what your antral follicle counts are, because not everyone knows that stuff.
Yeah, we could
Um,
do a very like, I can't provide any advice but
oh,
we could definitely do
absolutely.
like an FAQ of like, send in questions or however you do it, and we can try and provide some education and,
Yeah, like, just even, like, when you say, like, an IUI, like, what is that? Well, I know what that is, but not
yes,
everyone
we're
knows what
talking
that
very
is,
much
or
jargony here of the IVF,
yeah, like,
podcast world. So
by all means, like, I just think it'd be so fun. I really wanna say thank you so much for being on here because I think it's so amazing for people to hear a nurse's perspective of, like, you got to deliver amazing news, and you got to deliver really sad news, And, you had to go through your own separate journey as well. But so many people are going through things like this. And I want the world to know, like, you are not alone going
Hmm.
through this. There's nothing wrong with you because this is what you have to go through. Um, and like, I personally know people that went through IVF, had children through IVF, and they got pregnant later in life naturally. And
Yeah, yeah. There's so many. I mean, I have so many of those stories of patients that were like, we've done this, and they're like, okay, this is the last thing we're going to do for closure. And you wouldn't have been able to start with that as a first choice because every doctor would have been like, no way. And like, we can't touch that with, an IUI with 6 follicles, not touching that with a 10-foot pole. But if you've had 3 failed IVFs and they know the quality of these, they've seen these eggs underneath a microscope and they know the quality of them and the risks, then that's up to your doctor to have that discussion, right? So yeah, there's so many like anomalies of things we can talk about that I think and that's the hard thing. There's so many like random things out there that can happen, but I think speaking to you don't know what your nurse is going through. I think we tend to gravitate. You'll find a lot of nurses in fertility have been through fertility treatments because,
Mhm.
you find that impact of how you can help people and you find that, that space that you can help and you feel like you're doing something good to help and that's your calling, right? So you'd be surprised how many nurses are sitting there going and have done it themselves or know exactly what you're talking about. So
Absolutely.
we've all kind of been there.
Absolutely. Well, anyway, thank you so much for being
Thank
with me
you.
today. And I'm excited. I'm beyond excited that you were here with me today. And I'm glad that we've
And I'm
reconnected in
sorry it
many
took
ways.
so long. My goodness, this
Oh,
getting schedules aligned, the
that's okay.
craziness.
I get it. I get it. So,
Well,
anyway,
thank
have an
you.
amazing day.
Thanks, you too.
If you found this helpful or know anyone that needs to hear this, please share. And don't forget to leave a review and subscribe. In love and gratitude, Jessica.